Okay, just so you know, this is being recorded. So hi, my name is Robert Brian Gomez. I'm not the athletic Robert Gomez that teaches over at the coach. I'm the non-athletic one. Um, and so yeah, I teach at Salinas Adult School. I'm a high school equivalency teacher. I specialize in high set. I am also an autistic adult, and what comes along with that is special interests and a lot of the time. So one of my special interests, and it's been this way since I was 4 years old, is been video games. Ever since my dad brought home an Atari 2600 back in 1980. So it's always been, an interest of mine. And along with that, computers and computing technology. But first of all, I just want to talk to you guys. So, just real quick. So, what comes to your mind? Because I know I when I presented in 2016, the last time I did this, it was still called the Tech Slam. And gamification was like a huge buzzword. But so, what comes to mind, you guys, when you read about gamification in the classroom? Does it have these days, right? Does it have a negative or a positive connotation in your mind, right? Of if you used it, or have you heard about cases of people using it? Has it been positive or negative, right? And you can go ahead and put your responses in the chat, or you can raise your hand really quick and just give you guys a little time to kind of think about that real quick. So when it comes to mind, so if you ever use like Class Dojo or something like that, um, right? What comes to mind? Usually using games to learn, okay, using it as a positive thing. Well, that's good, right? Using games to learn. I know there was a history teacher over at North High that used to have a big tabletop game. I think it was almost like a fancy game of Risk. He used to taught the U.S. history. Yeah, it can be a positive thing. Anybody else? Yeah, it makes learning fun, more engaging. Okay, good, 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 good. They're big gamers, right? So it's positive, right? It's right. Good, good, good. And I'll have a question about that later on in the presentation, because I just want to pick your brains a little bit on that one, because some of them eventually um, do come to me. Uh, so great. Okay, good. So all right, so thank you guys for sharing your thoughts on that. I appreciate that. But gamification, or gaming, or just playing games, right, as to reinforce learning, can be a really uh useful tool um in the classroom. This concept of gamification, right, of gamifying the classroom, which, like I said, was a huge thing in like back in 2016, has its pluses and minuses. And one of the things I'm going to talk about today is finding the game in your design, in the designing of your curriculum, or the design of your lessons. um, this is definitely, for sure, if you're in credit recovery, or if you're running a computer lab, or anything where you're using educational software to kind of guide your instruction. So let's talk about finding the game versus gamification, right? So gamification is motivation, generated from external rewards, right? So this originates in the concept of work and not play. So right, it's about increasing productivity from external rewards. However, what I'm going to challenge everybody with today is this idea of finding the game, which is motivation generated from intrinsic internal rewards, right? And anybody who works out in a gym probably has experienced that, right? When you first start, working out, you can't, put up as much weight as you want to, but over time, you really start seeing, the gains, right? That's always, a pleasure. It's an internal reward, and it's almost like you feel like you're leveling up, right? So, but that motivation, coming from internal reward. So this originates in this concept of play by way of games and dramatic action, right? And dramatic action, we'll get to that, right? Because gaming and drama or theater, the study of theater, or this performance studies, is strongly connected to each other. So let's talk about that a little bit. First of all, let's talk a little bit about. I'm going to show you an example of, let's say, the dark side of gamification, and you know why is since it's focused on work, since it's focused on productivity, we can kind of see where it had what it has come to in recent days. So I'm going to go ahead and play this for you guys.
But what exactly is happening here with this gamification of the different tasks happening for all of the warehouse employees there at Amazon?
Yeah, so my reporting kind of uncovered that in Amazon warehouses in at least 20 states around the US, some Amazon workers, specifically the pickers and sorters in the warehouses, some aspects of their jobs now have these gamification screens installed in them. And what that means is, instead of kind of going about your day, having to take stuff off robotic shelves and put it in a robotic kind of tread or kind of sort thing, what you end up doing is you do that exact same part of your job, but depending on how fast you work or how well you complete certain tasks, you can earn points on a kind of video game arcade screen installed in your workstation. And those points can be used to play one of 6 games, which all kind of have a retro arcade feel. One of them seems like Tamagotchi. It's called Tamazilla, and you can spend points to buy virtual pets like narwhals or sparkly dragons, and then spend points accrued by your labor to like raise them and whatnot. Or in the other ones, you can compete against your fellow warehouse workers to race a car around the track, but how fast you go is dependent on how quickly you do your job. So it raises kind of a lot of questionable issues because one, this is making workers, I guess, days more enjoyable. That's why Amazon's doing it. But it also is kind of encouraging them to go faster, work harder for imaginary internet points.
Right. And so, I don't know if those that came up with this idea. Oh, well, I'm sure because I think it's originated in the business world. But you know, educators maybe have this in mind if this was the end goal when thinking about gamifying their classroom, right? Which is something to think about because we may have Amazon coming to Salinas, right? Um, However, what I propose and what I
But
suggest
what exactly is happening?
is, coming at it from another direction and not from work, but actually from play, right? That play is innate, that's how we learn. And that play is free, right? And it's freedom. It's outside of our ordinary day, right? It's a temporary, kids talk about liminal space here, but I'm talking about more of a temporal liminal space, right? It's outside of everyday life and boundaries. And the other thing about play is that intrinsically it's not for making money. It's not materially profitable, which is why I think that gamification is not really centered around play. It's actually more centered around work. So what we need to do is we need to tap into that natural sense of play that we are born with, right? And that many animals are actually born with. So let's go ahead and continue. Well, first of all, gaming, right? Gaming is a particular type of play, right? Gaming, has a rule-based system. It, there could be different outcomes, at least two, right? And those outcomes can be, have different values assigned to them. And also, what makes gaming, right, is that the player has some kind of control over the influence of that outcome, right? Um, and so because of that, we as human beings have some kind of emotion attached to that outcome. That's why we care. That's why we care when our home team wins, right? Um, so we, are attached to it. There is an attachment. A really good example of this is chess, and I have kind of two versions of this. For those of you who want to read it in detail, you can kind of look at the long paragraph later on, but I'm just going to go through the kind of the bullet points of this. So chess is a really perfect example of playing and game, right? It's a chess has a system of rules. There's pretty much you know two outcomes, at least two outcomes, win, a loss. Winning takes efforts, investment of time. It's an investment of, practice and training, right? And the consequences are negotiable, which means they might have real life implications, especially if, you've seen people on the professional circuit and, you've seen big time chess players on the professional circuit, just really impactful. If you remember in the news, there was a professional who got caught cheating, right? World class chess player got caught cheating, and that was a huge scandal. So yes, there are real life implications, and it does tell a story with emotions attached. It doesn't seem like it because they're just pieces on a board, but yes, there are emotions attached. They can tell stories, right? Chess is drama, right? It tells a story, right? It is a simple story. It's a simple dramatic conflict between, two armies, right, going against each other. And, it's good versus good, evil versus evil, whatever. Somebody's the good, maybe both are the good guy, right? Or maybe both are the bad guy. But, and then, and the high meta narrative of this, we give we give meaning to these games. So sometimes it might be more than just winning and losing. For some people, it's their livelihood, right? Some people, this is their career. They make money, or at least, they may gamble on it. But they create games, right? Sporting events, whatever the Olympics are coming. People talk about the drama, right? These games create dramatic action. And, this is where we get into the drama, theater and performance studies aspect of that, right? For those of you who were communication majors, you may have a bigger key into what performance studies is, but if not, that's okay. What is dramatic action, right? So dramatic action is simply when something happens and it's because something else made that thing happen or allowed it to happen, right? It's cause and effect, right? We go back to good old Aristotle, right? Dramatic action is a process of causal events and reactions, right? And that's all it is, right? That is dramatic action. So we know that, and that does happen in games, right? So let's talk about video gaming, right? So when that first move is made in a game, right? When that first action is taken, you know, a series of actions will happen, right? The actor, the gamer becomes a protagonist in their own narrative, right? They become figuratively and sometimes literally, they become the hero of the story. If you ever been to the gym, going to back to that gym, you are the hero of your own story, right? You're building up yourself, your cardiovascular system, your muscular system to be, bigger and better, right? And right, you become the hero of your own story. And however, if they don't have a guide, if they don't have a teacher to mentor and train and educate, you can get overwhelmed, right? If you've ever been to a gym and you have no experience, right? there's all these machines, there's all these free weights. What if I hurt myself, right? What do you do, right? And you know, you need some kind of facilitator, right, to help you with that. And if not, you can become the loser, and then it's game over, right? Now, thinking about the game board, thinking about the gym, thinking about the classroom, right? The dungeon becomes the classroom and vice versa, right? It is a challenge that must be overcome. So an educator and a rule system must create a narrative environment. Think about your classroom for a moment, okay? Think about your classroom. You can create a narrative environment where the aspirant, right, or the beginning learner can acquire and master all these skills that build, you know, on top of each other, right? And you know, video games, and one of the reasons why video games is it's so attractive to people is because it's been teaching through environment for years, right? Without saying a word, been teaching through environment. So what is your environment? And I'm not even talking about your spatial environment in your classroom. I'm talking about your, you know, your curriculum, right? Your course design, right? Um, right? How is that, you know, helping with their learning? So let's take a look at a first example, right? We're going to take a look at one of the most famous uh, examples of game design ever, which is World 1-1 in Super Mario Brothers. It has been copied, it has been parodied. You know, it's a prime example of teaching without saying a word, right? All these kind of visual and spatial, you know, clues kind of tell us, right? You know, if you do this, you'll live. If you do this, your character's not going to live, right? You know, the lessons are taught wordlessly and through this environment, and through what is important, through player agency, right? That ability to make change, right? So there's in just a few seconds, you learn so much, right? And that informs you not only how to play this game, but it also informs you on how to play other games, right? So those skills that you acquire here are transferable, right? And that's something that we want our learners to have, right? And you know, we think about this narrative environment, think about navigating systems, right? So the protagonist, right, your student, your learner, you know, they learn about the what are the rules, right? How do I navigate through this, through, you know, this environment, right? And they start plotting a trajectory, right, from the time they enter their freshman class, you know, on the first day to the time they walk the stage, right? Everybody takes kind of a unique path through this system of rules, right? That's embedded into the architecture of, you know, that has been built from this system of rules, including how you, you know, put together your curriculum, right? How you put together your class, right? And so the player and the games designers, they come together, right? The person who makes the game and the person who plays the game, they come together to play a game, right? And as a result, you know, the design rules heated and player trajectory through game space, right? This is where simple, more complex skills can be mastered, right? But this is also where participants, your student becomes the hero of their own story. I know we hate to say, oh, you are not the main character, all right? You've heard that, the main character, and yeah, it's true. Sometimes we're not, especially if it's someone else's story. But if it's your own story, right? You are the main character of your own story. You are the protagonist, and you are playing the game, right? And how do we do that? Well, it's just like that gym, you know, allegory, right? Is we start creating that positive feedback loop, and games do that really, really, really well, right? So let's take a look at another example. This one is from Metroid. And so how is that feedback loop? How is getting stronger, you know, help us?
Counterparts, the exploration, the character growth, the constant acquisition of better gear with which to perform ever greater feats. What sets Metroid apart is the fact that all of these mechanisms are one and the same thing. Samus herself is both heroine, weapon, and tool. As Samus explores, she grows in power by collecting the gear upgrades she finds along the way. And as she gains upgrades, she also increases her ability to explore the underground passages of planet Zebes. The more she explores, the more she becomes able to explore further. It's a simple feedback loop, but a profoundly addictive one.
Right. So this, you know how we say, so some games are addictive, right? And the reason why is because players can, track their progress, right? They can see how they have grown. They can look back and go, oh, wow, this is how much I've grown, since I first started, right? And that's kind of part of the feedback loop. It just kind of success feeds into success, feeds into success. And you can also reflect on how strong you have become, right? And how can we create this feedback loop, right? How can we, incorporate this, aspect of gaming design into our lesson plans? Well, one method I'm going to talk about today is gating, called gating the story, right? And we're going to talk about a little bit about how gates work in video games and how gates can work in your course design. Okay, so we're going to look at one example here of gating the story.
Indeed, Metroid seems designed to build off the player's familiarity with Super Mario Bros. As I've written about before, the game begins by giving the impression of a standard side-scrolling action platformer. As in Super Mario Bros., Rush and Attack, and even Rygar, you begin by running left to right, avoiding and destroying enemies along the way. You can only make it so far this way before you come to a seeming dead end. In the third room over, Samus encounters a low-hanging wall, leaving only a gap too small to walk beneath. NES owners would have encountered a similar structure in World 1-2 of Super Mario Bros. So similar, in fact, it's hard to believe that the Metroid team wasn't inspired by that game. But where Mario could either run beneath the gap while in his unpowered up form, or shatter the bricks above it to create a path, or perform a running slide beneath it by ducking, Samus has none of these options. She can only run, jump, and shoot, and neither of these will get her past the obstacle. Instead, you're forced to backtrack to the opposite side of the initial starting point, where a power-up awaits just beyond the initial screen in the wrong scrolling direction. The placement of the item forces you to come to terms with the fact that you're going to be playing this game differently than you did Mario, which was an adventure that wouldn't even allow the screen to scroll backward. Even Kid Icarus used that style of ratchet scrolling throughout, meaning Metroid works like Kid Icarus's dungeon stages, but with the free scrolling of Mario. Anyway, this item hidden on the opposite side of the starting point is called the Maru Mari, and it allows Samus to duck. Kind of like Mario, for whom it probably isn't named. Unlike Mario, Samus turns into a rolling ball when she ducks. In ball form, she can roll freely through the world. Ducking into a ball allows you to slip through narrow passages, and it also puts Samus in a kind of standby status that allows her to drop explosive bombs. Once she's added bombs to her arsenal, of course. Bombs work as both weapons, capable of damaging foes, and as tools that can shatter certain tiles in the floor and wall, revealing new passageways.
Right. So, through design, right, through embedded narrative and through embedded design, once again, wordlessly, lessons are taught, right? And not only lessons are taught, but, gates are lifted, right? So as you could see, there was a gate, a literal gate, right, in front of the player. And then once the player kind of did some exploration, right, they were able to, and once, the narrative, the embedded narrative and the embedded design in the level was guiding them, right, wordlessly, to the right solution to this. And once they were able to do that, whoa, the whole world is, revealed, and there are a lot more choices. So one of the things you can do, especially like I said, if you are involved in credit recovery, if you're working in a lab or anything like that, is you control the flow of your material, right? Now here I'm talking about adult learners, but this may be transferred to, to other situations. assuming that your learner or your student is a protagonist of their own story, we as teachers, as the designer of the curriculum, of course, we can initially limit the number of choices or options that the learner has at the outset, right? And then we open up a wider number of options when the learner has mastered the basics of the course structure, meaning the rules and the course content, right? We're talking about creating pathways. Um, and then we can start to, after a while, we can start to narrow the choices as the learner comes to the end of the course to maintain focus and persistence, especially if they're getting ready to test out, right? This is when they're getting ready for their, cumulative assessments, right? So, controlling, releasing, and then tightening the flow of the material that they get, right? Too much becomes overwhelming, too little, they may not feel like they have power or agency over their trajectory in the class, right? Um, so we're going to talk an example. We have case one. It's on Knights of the Old Republic. It's 2003 BioWare. So this was a role-playing game. It had D&D rules, but you wouldn't have known it if you played it. It's a turn-based system. The story is, stop the Sith Armada from taking over the galaxy. It's based in the Star Wars universe. There's a lot of side stories and quests, a lot of allies. But the player, they control a custom protagonist. They're a Jedi character, but they can choose, how they're going to interact with the world, how they're going to interact with characters. Are they going to do good things? Are they going to be light side people? Are they going to be dark side people? Are they going to cheat, lie, steal, from the regular folks in the game, right? There's character growth, there's power growth, and from that, choices increase, right? There's a point where the whole world, the whole galaxy, not the whole galaxy, but a lot of galaxy is, all for you to explore. And also, it's also a quest for personal identity, right? It's a classic, the character has amnesia and needs to discover themselves, as of course we all do when we first, start our school experiences, right? It's a quest for growth, quest for personal identity. Right. So this is where we get into, tying this in with dramatic action, right? And also with, controlling the flow of information. So for example, in this game, I kind of, analyze this. And so in Act One, right, you first start, not as strong, limited choices, you're only limited to one place. This is where you learn the rules, where you learn the basic skills. And then once you get to a point in the story when you can leave the planet finally, then this is the part of the story, Act Two, where you have the most options and choices ahead of you, right? There's many places where you can grow, where you can go and grow, actually. This is where growth happens. This is where skill growth happens. And this is where a person has the greatest sense of agency, the ability to change their trajectory in this game. And, this is actually where that feedback loop happens, right? And then once they've acquired enough, skill, right, through and be able to reflect on that, often through, reflection and, formative assessment, we come to Act Three, right? And that has the least choices. That's your climax and your resolution. Now, your student, the protagonist, is now focused on the end game, right? It's passing the class, the final, whatever that might be. All the earned skills are put to the test, and the outcome is you either achieve the main goal or you quit, right? At least in this game, right? So we can do that with our class structure also, right? To create that feedback loop through gating. So I'm going to pause right here, just really quick. Mobile gaming's really popular. I know I do quite a bit of mobile gaming. So what mobile games were popular last year on your school site? You can put in the chat. And really quick is, why do you think these games were so popular? I'll give you guys a moment to think about it. You guys spend a lot of time with your students, and I'm sure you see and overhear things. I like to know, what are they playing right now, right? I'm not as cool as they are. Pokemon Go. Okay, I play Pokemon Go. Also, I'm level 38. I love visiting. When I visit new places, I make sure I spin Pokestops. I go, oh hey, this is my, I went to Universal Studios. Oh, there's, good. So they're playing Pokemon Go. What else are they playing right now? So real quick, I'll give you guys a moment. I can get some water here. Oh yeah, Flappy Bird was really big at the time. Candy Crush, Clash Royale. I think that's really interesting because those are those free to play games that are that have that really addictive, feedback quality to them. I think that's really interesting. So no one's playing the Fortnite anymore. Um, so good. All right. So yeah. So those things. Yeah. And a lot. And whatever they're going to play this year, or whatever they've been playing, there's a good chance. They probably did have that. That addictive feedback loop, and a lot of that comes from gating, right? It's like, okay, we're going to start you out, here, and once you've acquired enough experience points, then you'll be able to do more things, or you'll be able to visit more areas, right, in your game, right, whatever that may be, right? Or oftentimes, and if you want to get there faster, you could pay real money, right? That's the catch. You can either grind for hours and days on end, or you could, you know, spend some money at the Play Store or the App Store, and you can move forward faster. Yeah. Okay. Great. Great, guys. Thank you, and thank you for chiming in. I know it's end of the day, and some of you have been either presenting or you've been in presentations all day. So I really appreciate you guys sticking out, and I really appreciate you guys being here. So thank you for spending this time just hanging out. Um, okay, so let's go ahead and move on. So, oh, chess was really popular too. Yeah, I noticed that, right? That's right. I had a very young student. I teach high set. I teach adult school, but I have some really young students. They love leveling up. Yeah. Um, I've had some students, a lot of guys that are coming to me, they're like 18, 19 years old, and they, want to, get their high school equivalency, and some of them are asking, do you have a chess club? You have a chess club at your school? And actually we do have a chess club at the adult school, which is pretty cool. Yeah, they love leveling up. Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. If we're you make an account on chess.com. Oh, chess.com. Yes, 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 yes. That's right. Okay. Good. Thank you. Fantastic. So, so let's talk a little bit about, so now kind of now this is my second case, and this is actually what I've done in the past. So in at the adult school in ESL, um, or English language learners, all adults, right? Some of them have the option of taking using Burlington English. Um, if you think about kind of like Rosetta Stone, if you've ever used that, kind of like that. Um, and so I ran a lab, and it was based on a blended learning flex model, not high flex. This flex model was a little bit different. It's an in-person, unlike high flex. Flex model, it's all in person, it's blended. And 50% of that was, about independent study. It was language acquisition. Students, the nice thing about Burlington English is that it's still around, is it has a pronunciation. So you're also practicing conversation with a microphone and headset, and it can gauge your ability to pronounce, right? English correctly. And so, and also, writing and grammar and reading. Um, and also civics, cultural integration, education. And as a teacher, so my job during this 50% was to act as a support, as a monitor, case manager. Every student had to have a binder, right? Keeping track of their homework and also their tests. Um, and the other 50% was teacher-led instruction. So that teacher-led instruction was life skills, because many of them are immigrants. Civic, economic integration, right? How do you find a job? How do you find housing, right? What are your rights as a tenant, right? If you're renting, so things like that. And so that was the lab, right? So during that time when they're studying independently, they were they were the protagonists. Everybody were the protagonists in their own story, and I gated that very carefully, because if you have all the lessons, all the modules out there, and you might have experienced this yourself, it could be really overwhelming, right? And people are just kind of clicking on things and not sure where to go, or they might click on something that's too hard and they become discouraged, right? And so I had to carefully, after assessing them, um, and finding exactly where they needed to be, then I would, come up with a learning plan for them, right? And this is the way it worked, right? So once they were put in the correct level, students would, each chapter is called a module, and each module, there were two parts to it, right? They called them situations, right? And there was a part A and a part B, and that was all on the computer. So they would do that. Some of it was reading, some of it was writing, grammar, and definitely speaking, right? And they would go through that, and I would help if they needed help. Um, and that was the wonderful thing. Those that really needed the help, I was able to spend a lot of good one-on-one time with them. And those that didn't need so much help, they were just able to, blow past it. And then they would get to the worksheets, and the worksheets, that was the way I gated it. And that was the way I was able to check their learning, because Burlington has print material. And, I had a whole huge binder, several copies of the same, worksheet. So once they got to that part, their situation, whatever, for example, they were in module 5, situation 2, for example, and there would be worksheets to go with that. And so I would, once they finished, I checked it, I graded it, made sure they got a passing, they were doing pretty well. If they needed more remediation, I would either pull different materials for them, or I'd spend some one-on-one with them, right? That was my way of gating it. They could not test until I saw that they were ready to test. And then they would take a module test, and if they got a 70% or more, they would go on to the next module, wash, rinse, repeat. Right. And so gating that, and then, putting those gates in there really helped create that feedback loop, and something amazing happened during this time. Here's an example of where I had the worksheets and folders, had them labeled. So pretty much the worksheets allowed me allowed for formative assessment. Before students test out of a module, I was able to evaluate them, remediate, assign extra practice if they needed that before they tested out. right? And the results were pretty amazing. Um, I was able to individualize their learning. Um, and tardy learners were not left behind. Remember, we're talking about adults and we're talking about people who work. A lot of them are ag workers. Um, not left behind, work at their own pace. One moment. Sorry about that. Dry throat, not used to talking so much. So, teacher and student response, yeah, because remember, a lot of these people are coming home from work. A lot of them are working in the fields, and they go home for dinner and then they come to school, right? And but they weren't left behind. And also, I had the ability to work one on one, like a tutorial session, right? Adult learning, I can assess them formatively and cumulatively. Hate saying that word. An amazing thing here is student, because of this, they take ownership of their learning. They have to have a binder. They need to keep track. They need to hang on to their worksheets, right? They need to keep trying until they can unlock the next module. I don't open up the next module until they've shown that they know the material, right? And the learner can observe their progress. They could see how far they've come. And the most amazing thing happened. It was a miracle, and it's something that doesn't happen a lot in my part of the business. My part of this business, right, is that adult learners took their work home with them. They did homework. I would on Fridays, I'd have students say, okay, I'm going to take this home, and and then they bring it back on Monday, or they bring it home during the week, and then they bring it back to me, and it's amazing because that doesn't usually happen. A lot in ESL. And so that told me that they were invested emotionally in this, that they found the game, right? That because the curriculum was gated, they found the game, and in order to get to the next level, right, they had to put in the time, right? They had to, you know, up their game. They have to put in that time, the energy, that the commitment. So, um, I thought that was amazing. So, some thoughts on the future as I coming to a close, and I'm going to pause for any questions. Um, I'm implementing this in my course design in high school equivalency. I just started teaching high school equivalency in January. I start my first full year this year, so I'm going to further implement, some of this in my high set classes, and my emphasis is going to be on widening the scope, right, after loosening the gate, uh, you know, and narrowing this path as they approach certification, which does happen, right? The closer our students get to getting their GED or their high set, there it does narrow, right? It usually starts out, they have to take a bunch of courses, and then as they pass their courses, or they pass their tests, they're taking less and less, and they're focusing in on one or two. Also, distancing, finding the game, right? Finding the game in your instruction from gamification, right? Is intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation for adults. Because for adults, there, you know, there's other considerations that have to be made, because, adults need to be invested. they need to buy into their education, or else they won't go, right? But keeping that in mind, you all have, developing, I mean, they're kids, but they're, they're developing into adults, and they're starting to adapt this mindset of, is this worth it, right? Is this worth it to me? Am I invested? How am I invested in this? Because there has to be that buy-in, even though they have to be there, right? There has to be this buy-in. Now my moonshot project is creating an actual game using existing game creation platforms to create wouldn't say an edutainment title, but an educational game that is more about finding the game as opposed to teaching you. So that's my moonshot project. So one of these days, I don't know. Okay, and so that's about it. So thank you guys for coming. For those of you, there's my contact information. So it's Robert Gomez. So that's, I know there's another Robert Gomez, but his is Robert J Gomez. That's the coach. So it's Robert Gomez. This is mine at Salinas. So on and so forth. I do have a personal gaming blog, so some of my graduate work in the past is based in video game studies. So I actually have quite a bit of a background in this. I was actually the first person in my department to earn their master's degree, analyzing narrative structures and narrative environments in video games. So if you want to take a look at that, you totally can. It's also got some autism stuff in there, just some writings on that, because I am an autistic adult. Also, if you want to take a look at any of the works that I'm citing, because there is quite a bit of scholarship here behind this presentation, you could take a look at. It. I believe I have this all pinned to be on the chat. So if you want to take a look at this. Okay, so thank you guys for attending. I really appreciate it. Thank you for hanging out. So like I said, especially at the end of the day, thank you for attending. Please take a moment to complete the feedback form. So there's my QR code. Please do that. And so right now, we got a couple of minutes. Do you guys have any questions for me? You have any questions for me? You put in the chat. We got about 5 minutes. 5 minutes left. Do you guys have any questions? Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. No question. Okay. All right. So take an extra minute here. If not, then what I'm going to start doing is, if you have any additional questions, yeah, you can always email me. So I'm just going to kind of close the window here, just like what they did at the beginning yesterday. So close the window for questions. Okay, yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, for sure. Okay. All right, so that's it, guys. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your week. Enjoy the rest of your break. Oh, my all-time favorite game, it'd be BioShock. It'd be BioShock. That's my all-time favorite game. Uh, that's what I did my graduate study on. Thank you. Appreciate it. Good question. Awesome. Take care.